Thank you, Chairman Gosar, and thank you to you gentlemen for coming here today. I love to see the uniforms. Got a tremendous amount of respect for you and the work that you and your colleagues do across the country. I live in Hot Springs National Park. That's what I think of when I think of a national park, and I'm surrounded by the Ouachita National Forest. And I'm quick to point out when we need to have oversight, but also quick to praise people when they do a good job, and the folks back at home and all across this country are doing a good job, and I appreciate your service to our country, and I think this is something that you would be interested in as well, and that's the title of this hearing, to secure our border and save our parks or save our federal lands. And when I think about federal land, when I think about trip we made out to Yosemite where we did a field hearing this year, how beautiful that is. I think about going to the Grand Canyon. I think about Hot Springs National Park. But I don't think about what's in the photographs behind me. That's Floyd Bennett Field. That was last night and this morning, where migrant shelters are being built on National Park Service land, where NEPA was waived, where it was essentially declared an emergency to build migrant shelters on federal land. That's not my vision of the national park or the purpose of the national park, and I don't think it's what many Americans consider that to be. This is happening, and I think it sets a horrible precedent, and it's a travesty that this administration, and I know this comes from much higher levels than where you all work, where they've pushed this through. But we've got 5 national park units, not to mention other types of federal lands that share space with our southern border. It's equally beautiful, and these areas face challenges that unfortunately are becoming increasingly familiar across the United States. From piles of trash to concerns about human trafficking, it's just not what America's ideal was supposed to be. Back in September, as Chairman Gosar mentioned, he and I traveled to New York City to see firsthand the impacts of the migrant crisis on this great city. And park officials told us that this was happening. Well, it's happening right now, where they're building these shelters. When we got back to D.C., the committee held a hearing to investigate this abuse of the national park system. We hosted local officials from both sides of the aisle who put politics aside to fight the administration's reckless decision to lease Floyd Bennett Field and focus on how the migrant crisis has affected their communities. Unfortunately, the administration has now set a terrible precedent to use our public lands across the country to house migrants. This is a place where 1 million people recreate a year. New York City, where there's limited green space, limited opportunities for parents to take their children to run and play, and now there's migrant shelters there. If there were ever a time for bipartisanship on Capitol Hill, it is now. Instead of continuing down this path, the administration must wake up to the illegal immigration crisis and come to the table to work with Congress on securing our border and addressing the dangers and environmental impacts of our public lands. I've grown up and around federal lands. As a forester, I see firsthand why we have the protections in place to keep our public lands and waters healthy and accessible for all Americans. However, with record numbers of migrants crossing into the United States, we're seeing increasingly harmful impacts on the environment, including trash accumulation, habitat destruction, disturbance of lands and waters, and many other issues. Approximately 35% of the land along our southern border is federal and Indian land administered by 7 different agencies, 6 of which are managed by the Department of Interior and Agriculture. These agencies are some of the most treasured lands and waterways in our nation. They are home to many unique habitats, endangered species, and host popular recreational activities for Americans. Unfortunately, the crisis is no longer contained to our southern border. Unmitigated illegal immigration has allowed for criminal cartel organizations to operate more freely in the United States. In addition to bringing humans and drugs across the border, cartels have been operating illegal marijuana growing operations on public lands, especially up in Northern California in Mr. Lamotha's district. I do, again, appreciate your presence here. Look forward to hearing your testimony, and I look forward to this committee working to protect our federal lands for all future Americans, and I yield back.